Let us face, without panic, the reality of our times, the fact that atom bombs may someday be dropped on our cities. And let us prepare for survival by understanding the weapon that threatens us. An atom bomb destroys or injures in three ways: by blast, heat, and radioactivity. The blast of an atom bomb is its most important destructive agent. In Japan, whole buildings were flattened by its force. However, many buildings of sturdy construction, even though close to the explosion, remained standing. The principal dangers of blast are flying glass and debris, the fires it may start, and the danger of being crushed in collapsing buildings. The atom bomb destroys by heat. People caught in the open as far as 2 miles away suffered flash burns. Yet, protection could have been easily achieved. Here, a bridge post and rail shielded the surface behind it. Any solid material afforded similar protection. The third weapon of the bomb is radioactivity, thrown off at the instant of explosion. However, the majority of people exposed to radiation recovered completely, including a large percentage of those who suffered serious radiation sickness. Today, they lead normal lives. They bear children. Their children are normal. These, then, are the weapons of the atom bomb that we must protect against: blast, heat, and radioactivity. Our cities are prime targets for atomic attack, but mass evacuation would be disastrous. An enemy would like nothing better than to have us leave our cities empty and unproductive. If an emergency should come, our factories will be battle stations. Production must go on if we are to win. Our offices and homes will also be posts of duty, not to be deserted. With the knowledge of the first atomic explosions to guide us, our chances for survival will be far better than those of the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if we act on our knowledge and are prepared. The first job is to look over your own home for shelter possibilities. If you live in a private home that is well built, the cellar is the safest place to be. The lower you get, the more barriers there are likely to be against blast, heat, and radioactivity. Select the basement wall nearest the probable target area of your city. If the house is blown over, it will most likely fall away from this wall. If you have a workbench or strong table big enough to get under, move it into your shelter area near a wall or strong supporting column. If the time comes when you actually have to take shelter, lie under the table. If you live in a home that has no basement, choose a shelter area without windows on the ground floor. An interior hallway is probably best. In time of emergency, the shelter area should be cleared of mirrors and other objects that might cause injury. If you live in an apartment house, rules for taking shelter will be posted in your building. Learn them. Also, learn the location of public shelters in areas where you work or frequently visit. There are many things you can begin doing right now. Fireproof housekeeping is one, so clean up that attic. Keep waste in covered containers. Don't let trash pile up in the yard. Set aside a small supply of canned goods. They're safe from radioactivity. Have a good flashlight on hand. Electric lights may go out. Keep a first aid kit and learn how to stop bleeding. Make a habit of keeping a bottle of fresh water handy. A radio will be important for receiving vital instructions. Finally, prepare the shelter area and collect all necessary shelter equipment. In case of an actual raid or test drill, the alert will be a warbling siren blast lasting 3 minutes. Once you hear this, act fast. down the shades or blinds and close the drapes against flying glass. Turn off the burners of your gas or electric stove. Disconnect any heating elements, such as electric irons, hot plates, or bathroom heaters. Close all outside doors, but leave them unlocked. Turn off the gas or oil burners. Taking shelter may be a race against time, even when you have some advance warning. But possibly, there may be no time. An attack could come without warning. The sky would suddenly light up. If a doorway is right at hand, use it. If the nearest shelter is more than a couple of steps away, fall to the ground immediately. Flying glass and debris are immediate dangers, so stay where you are until you're sure it's safe to move. If you are at home when a surprise attack occurs, crawl beneath a table if it is very near, or drop to the floor with your back to the window. The immediate danger is over in about a minute, unless the explosion occurred near the ground or water. In this case, radioactive materials are trapped in the particles of dirt or water thrown up by the explosion. When these particles fall back to Earth, they may be dangerous. So get indoors immediately after a ground-level explosion. Cover broken windows against radioactive dust with blankets or cardboard. Civil defense radiological teams, equipped with radiation survey meters, will check on contamination in any bombed area. Stay under cover until you hear officially that it is safe outside. If you have been exposed to radioactive dust, wash the exposed areas. Pay particular attention to your hair. Get all the dirt from under your fingernails. If the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had known what we know about civil defense, thousands of lives would have been saved. Yes, the knowledge is ours, and preparation can mean survival for you. So act now. Someday your life may depend on it.
Diddle-dum-dum, diddle-dum-dum, diddle-dum-dum. There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and cover, duck and cover.
He did what we all must learn to do. You
and you
and you and you.
duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover.
This is an official civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association.
Produced by Archer Productions, Incorporated. Hey, Bert, come on out and meet all these nice people. Please? All right. We really can't blame you. You see, Bert is a very, very careful fellow. When there's danger, this is the way he keeps from being hurt. Sometimes it even saves his life. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school. We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it, just as we are ready for many other dangers that are around us all the time. Fire is a danger. It can burn whole buildings if someone is careless. But we are ready for fires. We have a fine fire department to put out the fire, and you have fire drills in your school so you know what to do. Automobiles can be dangerous, too. They sometimes cause bad accidents, but we are ready. We have safety rules that car drivers and people who are walking must obey. Now, we must be ready for a new danger, the atomic bomb. First, you have to know what happens when an atomic bomb explodes. You will know when it comes. We hope it never comes, but we must get ready. It looks something like this. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. If you were not ready and did not know what to do, it could hurt you in different ways. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion, it can smash in buildings and knock signboards over and break windows all over town. But if you duck and cover like Bert, you will be much safer. You know how bad sunburn can feel. The atomic bomb flash could burn you worse than a terrible sunburn, especially where you're not covered. Now, you and I don't have shells to crawl into like Bert the Turtle, so we have to cover up in our own way. First, you duck, and then you cover. And very tightly, you cover the back of your neck and your face. Duck and cover underneath a table or desk or anything else close by. In Betty's school, they are talking about the atomic bomb, too. Betty is asking her teacher, how can we tell when the atomic bomb may explode? And her teacher is explaining that there are two kinds of attack, with warning and without any warning. We think that most of the time we will be warned before the bomb explodes, so there will be time for us to get into our homes, schools, or some other safe place. Our civil defense workers and our men in uniform will do everything they can to warn us before enemy planes can bring a bomb near us. You may be in your schoolyard playing when the signal comes. That signal means to stop whatever you are doing and get to the nearest safe place fast. Always remember, the flash of an atomic bomb can come at any time, no matter where you may be. You might be out playing at home when the warning comes. Then be sure to get into the house fast, where your parents have fixed a safe place for you to go. If you are not close to home when you hear the warning, go to the nearest safe cover. Know where you are to go, or ask an older person to help you. You know the places marked with the S sign? They're safe places to go when you hear the alarm. If there is a warning, you will hear it before the bomb explodes. But sometimes, and this is very, very important, sometimes the bomb might explode without any warning. Then the first thing we would know about it would be the flash. And that means duck and cover fast, wherever you are. There's no time to look around or wait. Be like Bert. When there is a flash, duck and cover, and do it fast. Here are some older boys showing what to do if the flash comes when you are not in the classroom. This is what to do if you should be in a corridor. You duck and cover tight against the wall this way. Remember to keep your face and the back of your neck covered tightly. Try to fall away from windows or doors with glass in them. Then, if the glass breaks and flies through the air, it won't cut you. You might be eating your lunch when the flash comes. Duck and cover under the table. Then, if the explosion makes anything in the room fall down, it can't fall on you. Getting ready means we will all have to be able to take care of ourselves. The bomb might explode when there are no grown-ups near. Paul and Patty know this, and they're always ready to take care of themselves. Here they are on their way to school on a beautiful spring day. But no matter where they go or what they do, they always try to remember what to do if the atom bomb explodes right then. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. Paul and Patty know what to do. Paul covered the back of his head so that he wouldn't be burned, and Patty covered herself with the coat she was carrying. They knew how to duck and cover. They acted right away when the flash came. If they had been at this doorway when the bomb flashed, Paul and Patty would have ducked and covered this way, like this girl. Heavy doorways are a good place to duck and cover. She will be safer, too. Here's Tony going to his Cub Scout meeting. Tony knows the bomb can explode any time of the year, day or night. He is ready for it. Duck and cover. Atta boy, Tony. That flash means act fast. Tony knows that it helps to get to any kind of cover. This wall was close by, so that's where he ducked and covered. Tony knew what to do. Notice how he keeps from moving or from getting up and running? He stays down until he is sure the danger is over. The man helping Tony is a civil defense worker. His job is to help protect us when there is danger of the atomic bomb. We must obey the civil defense worker. We must know how to duck and cover in the school bus or in any other bus or streetcar. Duck and cover. Don't wait. Duck away from the windows fast. The glass may break and fly through the air and cut you. Sundays, holidays, vacation time, we must be ready every day, all the time, to do the right thing if the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover. This family knows what to do, just as your own family should. They know that even a thin cloth helps protect them. Even a newspaper can save you from a bad burn. But the most important thing of all is to duck and cover yourself, especially where your clothes do not cover you. No matter where we live, in the city or the country, we must be ready all the time for the atomic bomb. Duck and cover. That's the first thing to do, duck and cover. The next important thing to do after that is to stay covered until the danger is over. Yes, we must all get ready now, so we know how to save ourselves if the atomic bomb ever explodes near us. If you do not know just what to do, ask your teacher when this film is over. Discuss what you could do in different places if a bomb explodes. Older people will help us as they always do, but there might not be any grown-ups around when the bomb explodes. Then, you're on your own.
Remember what to do, friends. Now tell me right out loud. What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
Duck and cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
This is a radiological defense operations room, a nerve center for survival, which we hope we will never have to use. But since war could come, this room is ready, and so are others throughout the country.
Greatest. Louisville, 740 Zebra, thanks. 5 megaton producer.
The USA, almost 3.5 million square miles. And at the other end of our scale of size, tiny dust-like particles. They too have a name. And the name is fallout, radioactive fallout. A large-scale nuclear attack on the United States could produce a patchwork pattern of fallout covering 2/3 of the nation, more than 2 million square miles in a single day. In this 2 million square miles,
More than 100 million people living well beyond the destructive range of blast and heat could be subjected to dangerous or deadly amounts of radiation from fallout. Carried upward 15 miles or more by the mushroom cloud, spread laterally by shifting winds at all altitudes, fallout from a single thermonuclear blast could severely contaminate a 60-mile strip downwind from ground zero. 1,200 square miles within an hour of explosion. 4,000 square miles in 6 hours. All of us, even in small towns and on farms, live within fallout range of a likely target. Furthermore, since these targets are often only a few hundred miles apart, fallout patterns can overlap, intensifying the danger. How do we know all this? From practical experience. A thermonuclear test in the Pacific in 1954 produced a highly contaminated area 20 miles upwind and 220 miles downwind, with a variable width up to 40 miles, large enough to reach from Washington, D.C. to New York City, along the densely populated eastern seaboard. In this 7,000 square mile area, there would be enough radioactivity to threaten seriously the lives of all who failed to take shelter before fallout arrived. Let's look at it in another way. Let's assume that industrial St. Louis were hit by a weapon with the explosive equivalent of millions of tons of TNT. Depending on winds, fallout could extend 40 miles into southwest Illinois in an hour, to Terre Haute, Indiana, 150 miles to the east in 7 hours, and to Wheeling, West Virginia, another 325 miles within 24 hours. Total drift, more than 500 miles. Civil defense tests have brought the problem into sharp focus. In one exercise, an imaginary force of 500 bombers severely damaged this country's key industries. Yet, effects from fallout posed a more serious threat to the nation's survival than did the devastating but more localized effects of blast and heat. Let's examine some of the problems. Although most sources of water are located well outside of big cities, the wide drift of fallout could cause serious contamination of our surface water supplies. Fallout from a nuclear attack could gravely affect the nation's agriculture. Food supplies in fields or in open storage could become dangerously contaminated. Possibly they could be recovered for later use. But what about future harvests? They too could be dangerous if grown in seriously contaminated soil. Cattle, horses, and sheep might have to be kept out of pastures for a long time. In short, fallout from nuclear attack would threaten us with thirst and famine, as well as with sickness and death from direct radiation. That is why our survival as a nation can depend on how well we prepare to defend ourselves against radioactive fallout. And there is a defense against fallout. Before we examine our radiological defense programs, let's take a look at the basis of the problem. As every youngster learns today, there is nothing new or mysterious about radiation. A Roentgen, which we call an R, is a standard unit for measuring radiation. In an average lifetime, a human being is exposed to perhaps a dozen Roentgens. This exposure comes from natural radioactive elements in the earth, and cosmic rays from outer space. The human body withstands continued exposure to small radiation doses. It is when the rate of delivery is high, or the total dose in a short period is large, that recovery cannot keep pace with damage. Exposure of the whole body in a short time to 600 or more Roentgens of radiation will almost certainly be fatal. People receiving 200 Roentgens or more in a short period of time will get radiation sickness. Those receiving 600 or more in a short period of time will die. For your protection, shelter is the answer, since highly dangerous doses can be produced by fallout radiation. This is what happens.
3, 2, 1. Fire!
About 85% of a nuclear weapon's energy results in light, heat, and blast. But 15% of the released energy is radiation. This is of two types. The first, initial radiation, is emitted from the fireball shortly after detonation. Since for large weapons it generally does not spread beyond the blast area, initial radiation is of minor concern in the overall problem of radiological defense. It is the second type, residual radiation, that creates the fallout problem. Its production can be described simply. When countless billions of atoms in a large megaton weapon are blasted apart, hundreds of pounds of highly radioactive material are produced. When such a bomb bursts at or near the ground, tens of thousands of tons of earth and debris are carried as high as 15 miles in the mushroom cloud. This tremendous cloud becomes a floating carrier, which drops tiny radioactive particles back to Earth. Where these particles land depends on a combination of three factors. One, their shape and size. Even the largest may be no bigger than a single grain of sand. Two, the height to which the radioactive cloud rises. And three, the direction and speed of winds at various altitudes. Fallout deposit resulting from the combined effects of these conditions is generally divided into three categories: close in, intermediate, and delayed. Close-in fallout usually settles within a few hundred miles of the burst and reaches the ground within 10 to 20 hours. It is made up of the heavier particles in the cloud. Intermediate fallout descends within a few weeks of the detonation. Since the particles are small, they remain in the air for weeks, covering many thousands of square miles. Sometimes they are driven to Earth by rain or snow. Delayed fallout is composed of very small particles that may drift completely around the Earth several times and may not descend for months or years. Radiological defense personnel, RADEF personnel for short, are primarily concerned with close-in fallout.
As you can see, close-in fallout is our real problem in radiological defense. And the problem becomes even more complicated because the speed, range, and direction of fallout depend upon ever-changing wind and weather conditions. Large particles fall fast and land relatively near ground zero. Smaller particles fall slowly, land further away. Winds, which vary at all altitudes and seasons, affect the pattern of these deposits. With winds variable at different altitudes, the spread of fallout will result from the effects of all winds acting upon it. For this reason, radiological defense officers cannot use surface wind direction alone as a basis for forecasting fallout. Radioactive materials decay with time. You might say they cool down. After all fallout is down and radiation has been measured, knowledge of decay rates permit estimates of how hot it will be days and weeks later. With this information, civil defense can estimate when it will be safe to evacuate or to leave shelters. Remember this rule of thumb. There is a 10-fold decrease in radiation rate for every 7-fold increase in time after detonation. For example, a level of 1,000 R per hour at 1 hour after the explosion would be reduced to 100 R per hour 7 hours following the explosion. At 7 times 7 hours, or in 2 days, the level would be down to 10 R per hour. At 7 times 49 hours, or at the end of 2 weeks, the level would be reduced to only 1 R per hour. But remember, until decay reduces radiation to tolerable levels, there are only 2 safeguards against it. Distance, that is evacuation to safe areas, or mass, which is shelter. Underground shelters covered by at least 3 feet of earth, or basement shelters of the types recommended by civil defense will give substantial protection. This is why we believe that most people who live beyond the areas destroyed by blast and heat can survive fallout if they will follow civil defense instructions.
As serious as fallout is, we can cope with it through action as individuals and through an effective radiological defense program. An active program carried on by federal, state, and local governments. At the federal level, representatives of many agencies meet regularly to perfect methods of collecting and analyzing fallout information and to find the best means of advising our states and communities about fallout conditions after a nuclear attack. An important part of the radiological defense program is a series of monitoring networks stretching across the country. A combined system of federal, state, and local stations, thousands in all, which will gather information on radiation levels as soon as fallout begins to spread downwind. On the basis of this information, transmitted by top priority communications of every type from coast to coast, early, effective action for our protection would begin at state and local levels. In some cases, evacuation. In most cases, shelter. The federal monitoring network at Weather Bureau stations, Federal Aviation Agency sites, Department of Defense Air Weather Service units, and other government organizations operates on a round-the-clock basis. At every level of government, radiological defense units are being equipped and trained to act. Fallout forecasts, issued several times daily by Weather Bureau stations, will be useful in estimating local fallout areas if we are attacked. Certain stations gather weather information that is processed to give an estimate of the areas in the nation where fallout could be expected. Sent over a vast teletype network to civil defense and other offices throughout the nation, the coded information is charted on maps to show sections threatened by fallout. Lines on the map show where and when the fallout is likely to arrive. At all Civil Defense regional offices, radiological defense personnel help state RADEF staffs in their regions. Regional officers arrange for the distribution of training kits, supervise the contribution of federal funds to state RADEF work, set up RADEF training in their regions, and coordinate RADEF activities of all federal agencies in the region.
This is important enough to have sufficient copies made both correctly.
Midwest weekend brought rain out and increasing radiation testing here in Ohio and western Kentucky.
After an attack, the regional RADEF staff will collect, analyze, and evaluate all fallout information received from the states, and will coordinate the flow of information to and from federal and state control points. The state RADEF people will use both ground and aerial monitoring units to make broad statewide surveys. Entire highway systems and key transportation routes, major industrial and supply sites, as well as urban and rural areas, will be checked as rapidly as personnel safety permits. The state RADEF unit also maintains working maps. It plots and correlates data, analyzes reports. By transmitting its summaries, it links regional and local offices. But it is at the local government level that radiological defense will be on an immediate, down-to-earth basis. Local RADEF will perfect and test detailed plans for operations. Keep all equipment in readiness condition. Train and rehearse operating crews so they too will be ready. It will set up communications between its units and for liaison with state RADEF organizations. When an attack warning sounds, local survival plans go into effect. Monitors will report to their stations. The public will be advised to take shelter or evacuate. After attack, first reports of radiation measurements will come from sheltered monitoring stations. As soon as radiation levels permit, police, firemen, highway maintenance men, conservation officers, everyone trained to use survey meters will begin the vital work of getting detailed data to control centers. From this information, current situation reports will be prepared. Using these reports, RADEF officers can answer urgent questions raised by local authorities. Can short survival missions be undertaken? Is our water safe? What roads are safe? Are feed, livestock, and crops contaminated? When can emergency teams begin decontaminating and reclaiming property? When will radiation die down enough to make it safe for people to leave shelters for brief periods and for utilities to be put back into service? Survival of whole communities can depend on the accuracy of answers given to these questions. Local RADEF plans also cover places where people work. Employers must shoulder their responsibilities by providing fallout shelters for workers. At work and at home, everyone must understand the hazards of fallout and the value of shelter. Every family must provide for its own survival for at least 2 weeks. Since radiation levels outside would often be deadly, fallout shelters will protect the most people. Both the underground and indoor basement shelters recommended by Civil Defense can be very effective. They must be stocked with a 2-week supply of food and water. First aid supplies, flashlights, and a battery radio with Conelrad frequencies 640 and 1240 clearly marked on the dial should be included. Factories, offices, apartment houses, and schools all must provide shelters. Remember, too, that personal decontamination is important. Fallout particles can be brushed from clothing and washed from skin. All in all, a big program. Some of it in being, some under development. But it takes action to fulfill this program. Radiological defense training is being expanded. First priority, train more instructors. At 3 national centers, in classrooms, on calibration ranges, learning theory and practice, more than 2,000 adult students each year are taking basic or advanced courses. Courses that will qualify them to instruct classes back home. A total of 600,000 monitors must be trained to make radiological defense effective in every community. To support this program, radiation survey meters are being distributed widely. These instruments, which measure radiation levels in terms of Roentgens or milliroentgens per hour, are the backbone of radiological defense. In addition to survey meters, dosimeters, instruments which measure total doses of radiation, are being distributed to the states and federal agencies. Radiological defense instrument kits for use in science classes are being distributed to 15,000 high schools throughout the nation. With the aid of this equipment, our young people will acquire a better understanding of radiation and will be better prepared to contribute to the nation's RADEF effort. Improved radiation measuring instruments and multiple-purpose computers are being designed, built, and tested. An intensive public education program to tell the American people about radioactive fallout and shelter is underway. For it is an informed public that will mean the difference between success and failure in meeting this threat. Informed people in homes and factories and offices must know their personal responsibilities for shelter and protection. Informed officials at all levels of government, from Washington, D.C. to the smallest town council, must understand the RADEF program and help make it work if the people of the nation are to survive.
I'll finish this spot out on here, RADEF, Charleston, West Virginia, 28C 0900 check.
Our efforts now to build a workable radiological defense will pay off richly by helping to deter aggression and by saving countless lives if nuclear attack should come. 16, 1945. This is the darkness of a desert morning. And here in New Mexico, a group of men wait tense 3 unbroken years of work. Work done in unprecedented secrecy. Cameras recorded from 6 miles away these views of the most concentrated release of explosive energy in the history of mankind. From the time of that first explosion until Hiroshima shuddered beneath the release of atomic energy, work on the bomb went steadily forward in closely guarded plants in New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. For over 100 years, the city of Hiroshima had garrisoned some of the Japanese Empire's finest troops. The city had never been subjected to actual bombing, but had been warned repeatedly. Now its army headquarters, barracks, ordnance, and quartermaster depots, factories, mills, and shipyards were to feel the weight of the atom's destructive power. 21 days after the New Mexico experiment, a B-29 was over Hiroshima carrying an atomic bomb. At 8:15 in the morning of August 6th, Japanese time, the first atomic bomb struck an enemy target. This is 0 Point on Hiroshima, the exact spot above the city at which the bomb burst over enemy territory, at the junction of the Matoyusu and Ota rivers. The atomic bomb was intentionally exploded well above its target in order to dissipate its radioactive material. The devastation you see here was caused by the explosion of the bomb above this 0 Point. Only the strongest buildings are left standing, and they are gutted. Looking north from 0 Point, this is what was left. Looking east, the camera records a scene of complete devastation in the immediate area. To the south, these are the ruins. Looking west from 0 Point, the same complete leveling is evident, the same inability of structures to withstand atomic power. Just 1/10 of a mile from 0 Point, the effect of the bomb blast can be seen on these stripped and broken trees and on this Russian-Japanese war memorial. Lines were literally blasted into the stone of the memorial. Here, looking west from the Sanwa building, the side of a concrete smokestack nearest the blast has been discolored. The Hiroshima Gas Company building on the right in this picture has been almost completely demolished by the force of the explosion from above, as though struck by a giant sledgehammer. The reinforced concrete Sanois Bank building was wrecked even more completely. These twisted steel beams once supported the roof. The direction of the bomb blast can be seen clearly in these scenes of the concrete parapet wall extending above the bank building's roof. Two-tenths of a mile from Zero Point was a Shinto shrine. Here, too, the blast stripped the trees and collapsed stonework. Originally, the base of this statue was polished granite, but now the stone is roughened by the force of the blast, which completely removed the polish. The lighter surfaces, which are being pointed out, indicate the angle of the bomb blast as though painted on the surface. The nearby lamppost shows flash burns on the side facing the blast. The Commercial Museum was also within two-tenths of a mile of Zero Point. The railing was blown off this bridge, and the steel poles on the bridge show the effects of the atomic bomb blast, which hurled grit with such force as to etch the steel. The front of this school is a quarter of a mile from and faces Zero Point. The sag in the concrete reinforced floor can be seen here in the entrance. The steel rods, which are now hanging, once supported a suspended ceiling. This reinforced concrete building was knocked sidewise, causing the lower story to collapse. This barren area, three-tenths of a mile from Zero Point, once contained the main Japanese military headquarters. The barracks were utterly destroyed. Most of the military personnel, of approximately 20,000, were wiped out. The distorted steel framework is all that remains of a building which stood four-tenths of a mile from Zero Point. Whereas this reinforced concrete building of the Chukogi Electric Company, 1/2 mile from Zero Point, withstood the blast much better. 6/10 of a mile out, destruction was almost as complete as it was at Zero Point. Wooden structures were completely collapsed by the blast. This was Hiroshima Castle. Its framework was demolished by the force of the blast, but fires of secondary origin did not occur. Because it happened to be at a 45-degree angle to the direction of the blast, the Hiroshima City Hall, with its heavily reinforced concrete construction, shows much less damage. Doors and windows were blown in by the force of the explosion. Shadows of the posts on Yorozuyo Bridge indicate the direction of the explosion. 6/10 of a mile from Zero Point, the bridge floor is etched except where shielded by the railing. Outlined in the surface of the bridge is the shadow of a pedestrian, which tells its own meaningful story. One mile from Zero Point, the blast damage shows lessening force, but the results of fires of secondary origin are still severe. On this side of a steel bridge over the Ota River, 1 mile away from and facing Zero Point, the lead paint was almost completely removed by the sandblast effect resulting from the explosion of the atomic bomb. The surface of the other side of the same bridge, however, was not visibly affected. Also a mile away from Zero Point is a Red Cross hospital, which, although damaged, never ceased functioning. This is the front of the building, which faces northeast.
On the northwest side of the building, the steel windows and all floors were blown in. This southwest side of the building again shows windows blown in by the external air pressure caused by the explosion. Here, however, the windows in the southeast wall were blown out rather than in. A look inside the hospital shows chairs in the same position as at the time of the blast. The backs of the chairs, which faced 0 point, were flash burned through the window. The mohair upholstery fabric was singed down to the base of the nap. The effect on this wall, which faced 0 point, was almost identical with the damage done by the explosion to the opposite wall. In addition, interior partitions were knocked down. Looking toward 0 point from the roof of the Red Cross Hospital a mile away, the tremendous destruction created by the first atomic bomb can be seen. Army vehicles of our occupying forces are moving through the city streets. Here, looking in the opposite direction toward the south, away from 0 point, only a few masonry foundation walls remain, and what is left of one reinforced concrete building. Looking west, still a mile from 0 point, the only sign of a small industrial plant is a lone concrete smokestack. Temporary housing facilities built with scrap material have been thrown up in the area. No matter what kind of construction the Japanese used, whether it consisted of wooden frame and mud plaster walls as here, or wooden lath and plaster veneer construction, they made no attempt to zone their various types of buildings. Barracks, homes, industrial centers of steel and reinforced concrete, factory buildings of brick construction, all were crowded together with no apparent regard for the safety of the civilian population. Within an area of a mile to a mile and a half, there was almost complete destruction except for some reinforced concrete buildings. From 1.5 to 2 miles, there was severe damage by fire and moderate damage by blast. From 2 to 6 miles, there was minor damage by blast and fire, varying from damaged roofs to broken windows. These wooden buildings, 1.5 miles from the center of the blast, were all subject to fires of secondary origin. The Higaski Railroad Station in East Hiroshima, 1.5 miles from 0 point, although still in use, was extensively damaged. The marquee crumbled from the force of the blast and has been removed. When the marquee fell, it pulled the brick veneer off part of the building. Inside of the station, steel beams supporting the roof were twisted out of shape, and the concrete walls, though still standing, show the effects of the tremendous concussion. This high school building, the same distance from 0 point as the railroad station, had its north wall smashed in by the blast. The second story of the north wall was especially badly damaged. Looking through a bombed-out section of the wall to 0 point, notice that not all the buildings in this area were as severely damaged as the schoolhouse. A portion of the wall of the school was blown in across the desks, and partitions were shifted. The high school wall farthest from the 0 point now bulges in the direction of the blast, and all glass was blown out of the window frame. Between 0 point and the main building of the novitiate of Jesuits 4 miles away was a hill which served to lessen the intensity of the blast. Yet, despite this protection, all the windows were shattered and part of the wall blown in. The chapel, which is the left wing of the building, is built of timber with plaster walls. The glass in the doors of the main entrance foyer were shattered, and the paneled ceiling was blown loose by the force of the explosion occurring 4 miles away. A group of Jesuits who were teaching in Hiroshima witnessed and survived the explosion. One of them has provided an eyewitness account.
Father, would you introduce yourself, please?
I am Father John Zenas, professor of philosophy at the Catholic University of Tokyo, which is under management of the Jesuit fathers.
What were you doing in Hiroshima at the time of the explosion?
Well, my philosophical class was evacuated from Tokyo to Hiroshima about 5 months ago, and I was staying with my class at a house of studies at the outskirts of the city of Hiroshima.
Could you describe exactly what happened in the morning of August the 6th?
I was in my room, which faces the valley, and suddenly I saw a light, like magnesium light, flashlight, which filled the whole valley. And looking out of my window to find out the reason for this peculiar phenomena, I saw nothing besides this light, and turning from the window to the door of my room, I heard a crash. It may have been 10 seconds after seeing the light, the flashlight. And immediately I was covered with splinters of the window frames and glass sticking into the walls and actually in my flesh itself. I tried to get out of my room, but found that our house had been severely damaged by the blast of this explosion. I had the impression at that time that the bomb had immediately crashed on the house. So severe, so strong was the effect of the percussion. But looking outside the house, I saw no trace of the bomb itself, but about a kilometer away from our houses, I saw several peasant houses which were on fire. After a while, we saw a procession of people coming from the outskirts of the city up the valley. Many of them, most of them, were wounded, especially the parts of the body which were not covered by clothes, like hands, feet, back. They came up to our house, and we did what we could, but there were no possibility to give much of aid. As a matter of fact, we used all our grease we had at that wartime in the house, and it was exhausted in a moment.
How many people do you think were killed?
All of us who lived through this experience at the spot estimate the numbers of deaths at least as 100,000. This estimate is not based on official figures, but just on our knowledge of special groups under the population.
Was there anybody to take charge of the city after the disaster?
There was nobody to take charge after the disaster, because all important people were practically killed. The mayor, the commander of the city, many high-ranking officers, a Korean prince, which was stationed at the time in Hiroshima, and also the regiments of the city were wiped out.
What is your opinion as to the story that the ruins of the city emitted deadly rain?
Well, I think that is just a rumor, because I myself and others of us have worked in the city itself immediately after the explosion for several hours, and we felt no ill effect at all.
Tell me a little about the Japanese reaction towards the Americans and towards the atomic bomb.
Neither myself nor anybody of our fathers heard a single outburst of hate against the Americans in those terrible days. And during the whole war, we didn't experience much about hatred against the Allies. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of the war, after the big Japanese victories, the Japanese were inclined to look down on the enemy. But then, after the offensive went off according to schedule, they began to admire the skill of the Americans. And especially since the majestic B-29 appeared over Tokyo, practically every Japanese admired the technical skill of the Americans.
Father, what is your and your colleagues' opinion as to the use of the atomic bomb?
We have discussed among ourselves the ethics of the use of the bomb. Some consider it in the same category as poison gas and were against its use on the civilian population. Others were of the view that in total war, as carried on in Japan, there was no difference between civilians and soldiers, and that the bomb itself was an effective force tending to end the bloodshed, warning Japan to surrender and thus to avoid total destruction. It seems logical to me that he who supports total war in principle cannot complain of a war against civilians. The crux of the matter is whether total war in its present form is justifiable even when it serves a just purpose. Does it not have material and spiritual evil as its consequences which far exceed whatever the good that might result? When will our moralists give us a clear answer to this question?
The business of living goes on in the devastated areas of Hiroshima. In the northeastern section of the city, temporary homes are constructed of whatever materials can be salvaged from the ruins. Near the Higashi Railroad Station in eastern Hiroshima, scrap lumber, tin, and roof tile are all used in an attempt to build anew, in no matter how flimsy a fashion. Immediately following the bombing of Hiroshima, the President of the United States delivered an ultimatum to the Japanese government. Surrender or face complete destruction. The ultimatum was ignored. At 10:58 the morning of August 9th, Japanese time, the second atomic bomb was exploded over the industrial seaport city of Nagasaki. Almost the entire population of 230,000 people was engaged in the manufacture of arms, munitions, and other war products. Two great Mitsubishi factories were located in the heart of the city. To the north, one of the world's largest torpedo plants, and further south, the huge steel and arms works. The bomb, which was dropped on Nagasaki, was aimed at a point midway between the two plants in order to cause the greatest possible industrial damage. Unlike Hiroshima, the force of the explosion at Nagasaki was largely confined to the industrial valley, which was surrounded by a series of hills that shielded many other areas of the city. Mushroom effect could be seen going higher and higher and reaching into the stratosphere. Because the bomb was exploded high above the ground, the greatest part of its harmful radioactive material was dissipated in the stratosphere. As a result, the area under the explosion was relatively free from radioactivity. Persons entering Nagasaki shortly after the explosion to do rescue work sustained no ill effect or injury. In an area of a little more than 3 square miles, there was very severe damage by blast and fire. Most buildings were reduced to rubble. Still recognizable from the air are the skeleton remainders of the Mitsubishi plants, the large steel and arms works, and the ordnance factory devoted to the manufacture of torpedoes. The Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Works extended almost a mile in length. Its buildings were modern and typical of American industrial construction, having steel frames and roof and siding of corrugated metal or asbestos. Buildings of reinforced concrete still stand amid the wreckage of steel frames. Some smokestacks survived. They offered comparatively little resistance to the blast. But as in Hiroshima, the directional force bent steel and stripped corrugated metal from the framework of the building. Where corrugated metal remained, it was pushed in like tissue paper. These buildings show a varying degree of destruction depending upon proximity to 0 point and building strength. This foundry, 3/10 of a mile away from 0 point, shows considerable damage in spite of fairly good construction. Other buildings were stronger, some being constructed to support heavy overhead cranes. Damage to equipment inside was nevertheless serious. This machinery had been used in the manufacture of naval rifles, anti-aircraft guns, and heavy artillery. In the valley, homes were scattered through factory areas. On machinery in many of these homes, piecework was carried on to help the Japanese war effort. Blast and secondary fire destroyed the lightly constructed buildings, in many cases leaving damaged equipment. Photographed from 0 point, this area of 3 1/10 square miles shows almost utter devastation by blast and fire. Note how hills in the south interrupted the blast. In a second area of 5 1/2 square miles, there was moderate damage from blast and severe damage from fires. The total area of damage covered almost 42 1/2 square miles, ranging from complete destruction to damaged roofs and broken windows. The greatest distance at which damage was measured was 12 miles, where, through a peculiar focusing of concussion, workers' barracks were knocked down. One-half mile from 0 point, a cracked smokestack. A prison of concrete and masonry 2/10 of a mile from 0 point was almost totally destroyed. The walls left standing were parallel to the direction of the blast. This area was completely wiped out from 0 point up to the church at the foot of the hills about a mile away. In the bed of the creek rests a dome which was blown from its place at the top of the church. The gasworks was blown into a mass of twisted steel. 2 concrete walls, the remains of 2 factory buildings. Bridges showed greater destruction in Nagasaki than in Hiroshima. But even close to 0 point, the downward force of the blast failed to damage roads and railroads due to the height at which the bomb was detonated. The main north-south street of Nagasaki was in use shortly after the disaster occurred. A typical residence on the outskirts of Nagasaki, a mile and a half from 0 point. 6 weeks after the explosion of the atomic bomb over Nagasaki, the survivors are busy working at the restoration of their homes. This is the record. Endless man-hours of work. 2 B-29s, 2 atomic bombs 3 days apart, 2 cities. The tabulation of that record speaks for itself.
universe, there are many natural elements and forces at work. And in his search for truth and the betterment of his lot, man has uncovered gravity, the invisible anchor that keeps him safely bound to Earth, electromagnetic force, which he uses in industry, and atomic power, the explosion of an inconceivably tiny particle of matter, setting off similar explosions in other atoms, the energy of the atom. Scientists have long known about radiation, one of atomic energy's chief characteristics. Today, they can detect the amount of radioactivity present at a given time with many specialized instruments. One of these is the Geiger counter.
Say, what is that clicking? You must be radioactive. Wait a minute, don't worry. You see, your watch has radiation, but it comes from the paint on the numbers that make it glow in the dark.
Well, what do you know about that? I've been carrying radioactivity around with me and didn't even know it.
Of incalculable aid to man's physical well-being have been the discoveries of medical science in the field of radiation. The most recent medical research in radiation has produced a whole battery of radioactive medicines manufactured at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and sent to hospitals all over the country. Atomic weapons to save lives. And in the field of industry, advances in the use of radioactive substances are constantly benefiting man's search for newer and better methods of production.
And we need every sheet of steel plate at exactly the critical thickness. No more, no less.
How can you get a measuring device sensitive enough to show a variation of 1/10,000th of an inch without stopping production?
We can use radiation.
How?
You station a radioactive substance at this point in the production line and pass the steel over it. Over the steel, you put a gauge to measure the amount of radiation coming through. Now, if the steel plate varies in thickness in one direction or another, the amount of radiation getting through to the gauge will vary, and that gauge will register the change.
Looks as though you've beaten it, Buck.
But what about the atom bomb?
It has been stated that to speak of atomic energy in terms of the atomic bomb is the same as speaking of electricity in terms of the electric chair. It is true, however, that the energy which gives us the power to heal, the heat and light to make things move and grow, is the same energy released in the explosion of the A-bomb. To state and local governments falls the responsibility for action and cooperation within the limits of their own jurisdiction. The local air raid warden of World War II with his white tin hat will have a new, more specialized fellow worker, the radiological monitor or meter man. His job will be to determine the extent of contamination by radiation in atomic attack. The meter men will probably not use the Geiger counter because it is primarily for sensitive measurements. Their basic instruments of detection will be ion chambers, which accurately measure larger amounts of radiation. In addition, the community civil defense unit will set up attack warning devices, suitable shelter in case of emergency, emergency communication centers, adequate firefighting equipment, hospital and first aid facilities. Every person has heard some of the rumors and old wives' tales of this atomic era.
Who's been giving you this information?
Well, the boys down at the plant...
You know there's a limit to what this A-bomb can do. You asked me if a flash from an atomic bomb could blind everybody. Of course not. If you look directly at the burst in bright daylight, you might not be able to see for a few minutes. At night, it might last for an hour or two. But in either case, it would only be temporary. Now, as for the radiation of the bomb, the chances that it will change your ability to have children, or that it will affect any future children you might have, are less than 1 in a million. Radiation will not make a place uninhabitable forever, possibly temporarily. No, the atom bomb will not blow up the world.
Then what will it do?
The three ways in which an atom bomb does its work are no mystery. The first is flash or fire. The second effect is blast. These first two effects of the A-bomb are therefore but a tremendously magnified version of any simple explosive. It is the A-bomb's third effect that is entirely new to explosives, radiation or radioactivity. But this radiation can be stopped. For example, 6 feet of earth, 3 feet of concrete, or a foot of steel all provide sufficient protection against radioactivity, even very close to the center of explosion. Fire, blast, and radiation. These are the three effects of an atomic explosion which endanger man. You are given warning. If there is a designated shelter or a reinforced concrete building available, go to it without delay. But even at home, you can effectively defend yourself.
Elsie, where are you?
I'm closing off the upstairs.
Good. Get down from there as soon as you can. Close all the windows, draw the blinds, and pull the drapes in front of them. That'll keep out fire sparks and glass splinters if the windows break. Close all the doors behind you, too. We've got to make this place practically airtight. Check everything here that might cause fire. Complete coverage is what you're after. The light colors reflect the heat and protect you from flash burns. It's better to wear coveralls because they're loose, and I can take them off and leave them outside in case they become contaminated.
The heavier the cloth, the better the insulation.
Elsie, you'd better pull the drapes on the windows back there. Joe, turn on the radio.
What about Mrs. Canning, the aircraft spotter? Does she have to stay outside in this?
She'll be spotting for planes, all right. And for people like her who have to stay outdoors in an emergency, heavy, loose-fitting, all-white clothing is the best protection.
Follow instructions. Stand by.
Very little time left. Since radiation travels in straight lines, I'd say the way I fix this corner of the basement gives us plenty of wall and earth and material between us and the possible military objective. We're well protected from the window, too. Yes, sir. Even if a bomb blew the house over, we'd have a pretty good chance here in the basement.
The walls can never be too thick. Now, children, I want you to sit down here against the wall. That's it. Now, crouch tight up against it.
Now listen, kids. If they're dropping an atomic bomb, it may go off any second now. Whatever happens, I'll give the signal when it's all right for us to get up. If there's an explosion, we'll wait about a minute after it's all over. Then we'll go upstairs and take a look around, see if it's all right for us to clean up.
This man has made good use of the time given him by warning. With calm and intelligence, he has employed the means of self-defense at his disposal. Thus, every man can greatly increase the chances of bringing his family and himself through any attack unscathed. But this man has an advantage, a well-protected cellar. If there is no basement in the neighborhood, seek shelter on the first floor of the house. An inner room with solid walls, with as many walls as possible between you and the probable target area. Get under a sturdy object, table, desk, bed, close to the wall. If debris should fall, the two will provide good protection. The most important thing is to keep out of line with the windows and to close them off so that broken glass will not fly in. Lie down flat on your stomach. Cover your face with your right arm so that it is protected by your elbow. Grasp the back of your neck with your left hand. But wherever a substantial underground shelter is available, it provides the surest, safest possible protection against atomic attack.
Civil Defense Bulletin. This has been an air burst. All persons attached to civil defense groups report to your post immediately.
Let's go, folks. Elsie, bring the blankets. We'll find out what happened to the windows.
What about the radiation?
Well, this was an airburst, honey. If the radiation didn't get to us when the atomic bomb exploded, just about all the dangerous stuff is gone. It went straight up into the air. The terrific heat makes it do that. And I don't think we're close enough to ground zero for the radiation to have even touched us. Elsie, you'd better tack those blankets up around the windows so that we can keep the house warm. I'm going outside to see if the house has been damaged by fire. If we're all right, I'll have to check the neighborhood.
Will you be all...
If there are any fires, honey, they're just ordinary fires, and we're supposed to help stop them. Children, you better clear up the broken glass and all this debris. All in all, I'd say we've been very lucky around here. Nothing to do now but wait for orders from the authorities and relax. I'd hate to have gone through this without warning.
You are out in the open.
Without warning, you are startled by an intense flash of light. You have seconds before the shock wave will hit you, before the debris starts flying. Hit the dirt. Get behind the nearest and best shelter. A ditch, a depression of any kind, but get down, flat on the ground, flat on your stomach. With your right arm covering your face, your left hand grasping the back of your neck. If you're out in the open in a built-up area, dive for the nearest concrete archway, the nearest and best shelter. Cover your mouth and nose with your handkerchief. It will help to keep out any possible radioactive dust. If you are blinded, it is only temporary. With the blast over, get out of the wreckage, remembering to keep as clean as possible. You're inside, perhaps in your own apartment when the flash occurs. You have seconds. Move toward the nearest doorway, corridor, or a stairway, or get under a bed or table, or get behind the couch or other large, heavy objects.
Are you all right, Mother?
Yes.
Alice, turn on the radio.
Where's Buddy?
I think he was out playing ball. Mother, pull the drapes and shield the windows with them.
He must have been caught out there in the blast.
Civil Defense Bulletin. This city has just undergone a surprise atomic attack. This was an air burst. Check for fires. Further bulletins are following immediately.
Shouldn't we go out and look for Buddy?
No. He's been hurt. Disaster units will take care of him. If he's all right, he'll come home.
Draw a pan full of water right away, Alice, and keep it covered.
Won't it be radioactive?
No. And don't take too much. Otherwise, you'll pull down the water pressure the firefighters need.
I'd better go out on the fire escape and see whether any fires have been started. Mother, go downstairs and see if old Mrs. Simmons is all right.
Fine, I'll go. But let me know just as soon as you hear what's happened to Buddy. Oh, Buddy's here. He's home.
Buddy, tell me quickly, where were you when the bomb dropped?
I was playing ball at the school diamond. I came home as fast as I could. I ran all the way.
Are you all right? Oh, you're hurt.
School's closer to where the bomb exploded. Mother, get Buddy's clothes off, then take him into the bedroom and have him lie down immediately. Clean up any of the cuts or bruises and bandage them.
Boy, it was hot, Grandma. I never felt anything so hot.
Buddy was much closer to the bomb than we were. Do you think he could have been exposed to prompt radiation?
I'm afraid he was in the danger range. He shouldn't have exercised so much, running home after the blast.
Corey, we've got to get him to a doctor.
No, Alice, we're going to follow through, cleaning up the house just as if we hadn't been caught unaware. And as for Buddy, the best way to help radiation sickness is to lie down and rest until you get medical attention. If Buddy has heavy nausea within 2 hours, it means he may have gotten a dose of radiation.
My.
I said may. And if he has, sickness induced by radiation isn't necessarily fatal. That's when we'll get him medical attention. Now we have work to do.
What can I do?
Oh, any of the food that was out in the open during the blast has to be kept separate from the rest. Then, as soon as we're notified to use the water, wash everything. Cans of food, pots and pans, the sink. But leave anything that you think might be contaminated to be tested later by the radiological crew.
Wouldn't it be best to just get out of the city?
No. If any evacuating is to be carried on, the proper authorities will decide it. We'll be notified and get orders and instructions. Right now, the safest place for us is right here. We're pretty lucky, Alice. Cement apartment house. No fires, not much blast, only a few broken windows. And chances are Buddy will be all right. If he isn't, doctors can help radiation sickness considerably by using whole blood. Don't worry, darling.
This man, caught unaware, by acting quickly and sensibly, has minimized the danger to himself and his family from the after effects of an atomic air burst. While most Americans need consider only the air burst in their plans for self-defense against the A-bomb, to people living on the shores of large bodies of water, the water burst brings additional danger. In the case of an atom bomb detonated underwater, there is hardly any danger from flash. There is still danger from blast and its resulting debris, but the area of damage is small. But the severe danger is from radiation, lingering radiation. The radiation is trapped in the water, and the heat and blast cause the water to rise. Then it falls, causing mist, which emits radiation wherever it falls.
Civil Defense Bulletin. This has been a water burst. Stay inside or get inside and wait for further instructions from your local civil defense authorities.
We aren't even going to budge for about an hour.
After that, we may have to wait another 24 hours before we even think about going outdoors. That radioactive mist will settle on everything, contaminate everything it touches.
The rule is keep away from the moisture and stay as far away from radioactive mist and water as you can.
That's right, son.
Well, then, we'd better go upstairs and fix the living room windows. They're probably broken, and the moisture will get to us that way.
No, stay put. We've taken every precaution to defend ourselves against radiation already. If we move to unprotected parts of the house now, we may get a bad dose of radiation, so we'll stay put for at least an hour.
What if we were outside, Dad?
Then we'd get inside quickly, and behind enough material that would absorb the radiation before it got to us. Joe, finish tacking this blanket for me, will you?
Sure.
And when you're finished, you'll have to wash your hands thoroughly. They've got a little breeze just now. A nice, cool breeze of radioactive mist. Now, folks, watch while I give a demonstration of how to defend yourself against lingering radioactivity. First, you remove all the clothing you think might be contaminated. Then you scrub every part of you that you think might be contaminated. Once, twice, and again.
Do you think you've got it bad, Dad?
No, I don't think so, son. But if I have, I'm not going to have it bad for very long. That's the whole idea of this scrubbing. If you get a little radiation, don't let it stay with you long enough for it to build up its dirty work. Because that's one way radiation can make you sick. If a little of it gets to you and stays with you long enough, it can do almost as much damage over a long period of time as one big dose all at once.
If you're radioactive right now, Daddy, does that mean that we can catch it from you?
No, Meg, I've got it all to myself.
Do you think we'll be all right, Jim?
Elsie, we've taken every precaution to lock that radiation out already. If it doesn't get to you right away, it starts to die. It may linger for a while, but it does die. And we can wait it out. We've got all the time in the world.
This man knows that his best defense against lingering radioactivity is patience, calm patience. In a water burst, the odds are with the man who stays put.
But what about the H-bomb?
The hydrogen bomb, though it might be 1,000 times more powerful than the atom bomb, would only cause damage over a radius 10 times as great, and the damage would be similar in kind. Hence, the principles of self-defense against the H-bomb would not change from those of the A-bomb. They would become more vital. Some of the scenes you have just seen have deliberately been made slower in order to bring home to you what precautions might be taken under ideal circumstances. When the alert is sounded, of course, you might not have time to do all of these things. Most important is to take cover in the basement, the center of a building, or in a doorway if you're in the street. Meanwhile, remember that civilian defense is everybody's business. All over the world today, powerful forces are at work for the preservation of international peace. It is the hope of civilization that the harnessed power of the atom will work for the good of mankind.
I can see why training for the National Guard is a young man's game. You've got to learn fast and have plenty of stamina to keep up with this rigorous training. A guardsman in the armored divisions has to be an expert in diesel engines, radio, and gunnery. In the infantry divisions, he has to learn leadership. He must master the art of artillery and hundreds of other combat and support-type unit work. And now they have taken over the mighty Nike bases and are experts in radar, rocketry, and mathematics. But more than all this, a National Guardsman is a patriotic defender of this country, a volunteer who is ready, willing, and able to serve you in case of a local or national emergency. You can sleep well tonight. Your National Guard is awake.
Some extra insurance that you might not have known about. It's your missile age, up to the minute men, your National Guard. You know, like any other insurance, you don't need it every day, but when you do, you're sure it's there for your protection. You know, there are over 475,000 officers and men in the National Guard prepared to protect your community. And they're not only trained for wartime, but in case of floods or hurricanes, forest fires, tornadoes, or just any emergency. The up-to-the-minute men, your National Guard, is your peace of mind insurance.
This film has been brought to you by your National Guard in cooperation with this station as a public service feature.
Thanks so much, neighbors. And by the way, before we bring on Miss Skeeter Davis, here's a very important message about your National Guard that I'm sure you're going to enjoy.
What's that? That's the first line of defense. What's that? The National Guard. Guard? Guard against what? The unexpected. What? The unexpected. In times of emergency such as hurricanes, the National Guard is first on the scene to aid victims. Gee. In fact, any kind of disaster, even floods, the National Guard is always there. Gee. Even in case of a sneak attack, the Guard has the latest jets ready to take off instantly, tanks ready to roll, or the latest equipment in readiness. Gee. And even foot soldiers. Hey, there's Uncle Louie. Sure, the Guard is made up of the men of the community, for the good of the community. Hey, how come you know so much about the National Guard anyhow? 'Cause my pop told me. He's a corporal in the National Guard. Gee, how about that?
Let us consider for the moment the turtle. Happy, carefree, complete peace of mind, because he knows that at any time, night or day, he is protected against the unexpected. Now, let us consider this person, or better still, this whole city full of people. Happy, carefree, they have complete peace of mind, because they know that at any time, day or night, they are protected against the unexpected, protected by their National Guard. Nike bases, radar control centers, artillery, tanks, infantry, jet planes, protected in any state or national emergency by important members of the country's defense team. Sleep well tonight. Your National Guard is awake.
Your National Guard is ready, willing, and able as an important member of your country's defense team. Ready for instant action in case of any state or national emergency. Sleep well tonight. Your National Guard is awake.
Medical self-help is an emergency measure to be used only in cases of sudden or extraordinary misfortune. If people require medical care in the course of normal, everyday living, they should always be treated by a doctor. However, when disaster strikes, you may not be able to obtain trained medical aid in time. There are many forms of disaster. They can happen to you and your family at any moment. This film is one of a series on medical self-help. Its purpose is to teach you what to do in an emergency situation when there is no doctor.
This powerful X-ray machine, a tool of medical science, is being used for healing purposes. The radiant energy it emits is able to kill all living tissue within its beam, both sick and healthy cells of the human body. Its invisible rays so highly penetrative that protective shielding with lead glass windows must be used. X-rays are much like the gamma rays of radioactive fallout. We began our picture with X-rays because you are all to some degree familiar with their effects. But radioactive fallout is another matter. If you're like most people, it creates many questions in your mind, and you have doubtless read or heard some falsehoods and misconceptions. This film will tell you what you need to know about fallout, so that if our country is ever subjected to a nuclear attack, you can help yourself and your family to survive its dangers. For fallout is probably the most dangerous product of nuclear disaster in terms of the number of people who could be affected. It is also the one
from which we are best able to protect ourselves. Let's examine what happens when a nuclear weapon is exploded near the Earth. First, there is blast, or the pressure wave created by the explosion, along with heat, the most intense ever created on Earth. Both will extend great distances from the point of the explosion, from 1 to 20 or 25 miles, depending on the size of the weapon. However, the further away you are from the site of the explosion, the less are the chances you will suffer the fatal effects of blast and heat. There is yet a third immediate result of a nuclear detonation: initial radiation. The final effect is residual radiation, the main concern of this film, or radiation that follows the explosion and one that may remain at high altitudes for some time before falling back to Earth. What exactly is residual radiation? Our sun, like other stellar bodies of the universe, is a giant nuclear furnace burning at temperatures of millions of degrees, while emitting various types of radiation. Among these are gamma rays, shorter in wavelength than their closest neighbor, X-rays. The Earth's atmosphere prevents these radiations, dangerous to the health of man and animal, from reaching our planet. However, when a nuclear weapon is exploded, man is creating on Earth, in the splitting of atomic nuclei, his own nuclear furnace to produce the gamma and beta radiations of outer space. Let's see now just how this radiation is created. At the time of the burst, vast amounts of dirt, stone, and other debris, vaporized by the heat of the explosion, are sucked up into the rising cloud. As the mushroom cloud forms, these particles are made radioactive, for as they cool and condense, they are contaminated by residue from the bomb. These particles, when they fall back to Earth, size and location of nuclear weapon direction of upper air currents. Let's, for example, explore the fallout produced by one of these nuclear weapons. It sends its column of radioactive material up to 80,000 feet, or about 16 miles or more above the Earth. Here, the radioactive particles, beginning to drift downward, are at the mercy of upper air currents that vary from day to day. Descending at various altitudes through many different layers of air that may be moving at varying speeds and directions. Thus, winds on the surface of the Earth give little help in determining the direction or the occurrence of fallout. Meteorologists, with their special instruments, however, can appraise altitudes as well as the total distance fallout will be carried. In a nuclear attack, keep tuned to your local radio station. It will keep you posted where fallout is taking place and its approximate amount. Though you may be able to see this dust once it reaches the Earth, you cannot see or detect the radiation it emits without the aid of radiological instruments. Nor can you taste, smell, or feel this radiation. Why is fallout dangerous to human and animal life? Because it gives off radiation as if it were a tiny machine. This radiation consists mainly of gamma rays, which are extremely penetrating. Like X-rays, gamma rays are able to injure, destroy the cells of our body if we are exposed to us long enough, or if we eat or drink material contaminated by fallout particles. Exposure to gamma rays can make you sick, can even cause death. However, no matter how long one may be exposed to fallout, he does not become radioactive, nor can anyone catch radiation sickness from him like a disease. In fact, this radiation cannot make anyone or anything radioactive. Now let us suppose that fallout has descended on this can. We'll let salt represent cloud dust. The particles don't go through the tin. The radiation does, but radiation is harmless to all except living material. It has no effect on the food inside. Now, or better still, the food inside cannot be contaminated and is perfectly safe to eat. The same is true of all foods and liquids that have been protected by packagings or containers, even the thinnest layer of cellophane. If you don't swallow the dust, there is no ill effect. If water for washing is in short supply, canned goods that may have been exposed to fallout can be handled safely with a piece of paper towel. Use one sheet of paper to lift the can and turn it upside down. There is no dust on the bottom. Now dispose of the paper. Wipe the sides of the can with a new piece of towel. And don't forget to put the contaminated paper in a covered receptacle. Now open the clean top. There will be no harmful particles in the food itself. A sealed loaf of bread that has been exposed to fallout can be salvaged in a similar manner. Turn the loaf upside down, close the bottom, which will be clear of dust. Then dispose of the towel. Now insert a sharp knife through the wax paper at the center of the loaf and cut upwards, making a slot 4 or 5 inches lengthwise. Insert your fingers through the slot and rip the paper slowly open. The bread can be safely removed to a clean place. Finally, dispose of the wax paper. Contaminated vegetables, such as potatoes, can be pared like this. Use a clean piece of newspaper and, working first in one corner, cut off one end. Move to a clean surface of the paper and peel in this manner. Move to another area of the paper and remove the other end. Dispose of all peelings and soiled paper carefully. After handling any contaminated food containers or vegetables, wash your hands. Fallout dust is dangerous, but it can be dealt with by following safe procedures. There is another widespread legend, the fear that fallout spells death to all life on Earth. The plain fact is that even if a great number of nuclear weapons were exploded, the resulting fallout would cover only a small area of the world's total land mass. The real concern then is this: if we are in that area, how do we protect ourselves? Like X-rays, radiation from fallout can go through almost every kind of building material. Over 99% would pass through glass, 66% through wood sheathing, 50% through a brick veneer wall. But only 1% of gamma radiation would penetrate 18 inches of concrete. And though it's not a building material, it's important to know that only 1% would pass through 25 inches of earth. Quite aside from the shielding effect of building materials, the intensity of radiation decreases with the square of the distance from the source. Thus, 10 feet away from a particle of fallout, the radiation rate is only 1% of that encountered at a distance of 1 foot. Other things being equal, the central parts of a building are safer. The radiation rate, or the intensity from fallout, decreases with the passage of time. In fact, for every 7-fold increase in time, the radiation will be reduced by a factor of 10. That means that at 7 hours after the explosion, the radiation level will be about 10% of its intensity at 1 hour. At 49 hours, it will be about 1%. Within 2 weeks, the radiation rate can be expected to decay to about 1/10 of 1%. Therefore, the most vital period to seek protection from fallout is the first few days after nuclear attack, even more so the first few hours. But remember, even with the passage of time, a low level of radiation can be dangerous. That is why you may need to remain within a sheltered area for as long as 2 weeks. These, then, are the 3 basic factors in protection against fallout: time, distance, and shielding. Time, meaning the longer you stay protected from fallout, the safer you will be. Distance, or the further away you get from fallout, the safer you will be. Shielding, meaning the more mass or weight you put between yourself and fallout, the safer you will be. You have often seen this sign on buildings. It means that indoors is a public fallout shelter, one of many and various kinds of buildings in your community that are similarly identified. Architects and engineers have carefully surveyed the shielding qualities of these areas to ensure they offer a minimum protection factor of 40 or more, meaning that in the event of fallout from a nuclear explosion, the mass and weight this shelter will place between you and the source of radiation will make you at least 40 times safer than if you were outdoors. Each of these shelters will hold at least 50 people and has been stocked by the government with austere supplies: food, water, sanitation equipment, medical kits, and radiological instruments. But what about millions who live in suburbs or rural areas, often far beyond quick walking distance of the nearest public shelter? With foresight, you can have a home shelter for the protection of your family, built from specifications and cost estimates for various types of shelters provided by your local civil defense office. The home shelter should be stocked with supplies of food and water sufficient for 2 weeks. Here you are afforded time, distance, and shielding if and when fallout so dangerous to human health should ever occur in your community. Just how much radiation can you receive without becoming sick? We measure exposure to gamma radiation from fallout in units called Roentgen. They're the same units used to measure X-rays, named for Wilhelm Conrad Roentgen, the discoverer of X-rays. People and animals may develop radiation sickness if they have been exposed to large amounts of radiation over a short period of time. Few people become sick who have been exposed to a total radiation dose of 100 Roentgens or less. However, exposure to more than 300 Roentgens over a period of a few days will cause sickness, may cause death. And if you receive an exposure of 600 Roentgens in that same period of time, death is almost certain. How can you tell just how much radiation you've been exposed to? These are the instruments commonly used to detect and measure radiation. They are part of the equipment supplied to the radiological monitoring team of every public shelter. The important thing you have learned is to see the danger in its true perspective. Make no mistake, nuclear attack would be a terrible catastrophe. Millions of our people would be killed by the initial blast and heat. millions more would be threatened by death from radioactive fallout. But that is a threat that can be combated, can, with knowledge, preparation, and courage, be faced and conquered.